Ladies and gentlemen, if there is someone who is at the helm of navigating the challenges of the economy, which is a difficult job even on a good day, it has to be this one individual, whom I'd like to invite on stage to talk about, well, everything. That's the economy, and quite frankly, the economy is everything these days. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Finance and Corporate Affairs Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman. Thank you for being here, ma'am, who will be in conversation with ET Executive Editor, Bodhisattva Ganguly. Over to you.
Thank you, Cyrus, for those interesting remarks about the ET. I might. Yeah. About the next ET awards. Anyway, let's get through this one first. So thank you, Finance Minister, for once again gracing the ET awards function. You've come we are lucky enough to have you at a time of where the world economy is seeing seminal changes. There was obviously the rate hike by the Fed, the first, which had been much signaled, but the rate hike has finally happened. There is obviously the RBI rate hike, which happened a few days back, which is the start of a tightening cycle. So we are lucky enough to have you, what we think will be probably your first on-the-record reactions to this. So interest rates have gone up in India to 4.4%. They're likely to go up even more. If you look at the RBI's inflation projections, they're 5.7 for the whole year, 5.1 in the last fiscal. Will this affect the government's plan to revive the economy, which in the last budget was largely through a boost in capital expenditure?
Well, no, because with the crude prices internationally behaving the way it has behaved, prices have behaved, and also when situations such as the Russia-Ukraine matter, when we prepared the budget, there was no clue about the war. But certainly about the crude, there was enough and more speculations. So price in commodities, price in the crude, and also the global situation of disruption in supply chain were there before us even as we prepared for the budget. So I don't think, and also to be fair, the US Fed had very clearly indicated that they were going for quantitative restrictions and tightening. And therefore, I don't think we are caught by a surprise by the Reserve Bank of India taking its own step. And I don't see it affecting our infrastructure investment, which has been built at 7.5.
So, no, I mean, the US Fed, it was well known the US Fed would raise rates. I mean, that was, and they will continue raising rates for the next few quarters. Perhaps the RBI, there has been some talk that the RBI was behind the curve and therefore they had to suddenly, but it did come as something of a surprise, did it not? I mean, the next monetary meeting was just a few weeks away.
It came as a surprise because it's between the two MPCs. But if US Fed had been saying it all the while, and the last MPC, I think the RBI sort of gave an indication that it's time for them to also act. It's the timing which came as a surprise to many, but the act itself, people thought, should have been done anyway. To what extent could have varied. So, in a way, it was a synchronized action. Australia did it, US is going to do it, and that night US really did take the first measure. So I see a greater understanding among central banks nowadays. And obviously when they meet at the World Bank meet in Washington, there's a lot exchanged as well. But the understanding of how to handle recovery from pandemic is not therefore unique or typical for only India. It's a global issue. And even as we handle that recovery, inflation, which is really festering and festering at some unbelievable highs in, let us say, the United States and in UK, not so much in India, but still the challenge of recovery versus inflation seems to be following a particular template which is across the globe.
So, Finance Minister, of course, there's no doubt that we do face economic issues because of, obviously caused by the supply chain challenges, the rising fuel prices and so on. But all challenges are relative. I mean, we've obviously seen what has happened in our neighboring countries where Forex, again, high fuel prices, high inflation, much higher than ours, depleting foreign exchange reserves have caused a problem similar to perhaps what we faced in the early 1990s, which led to economic reforms in India. Is that a worry for us? Not of that, perhaps of that virulence, but some, some variant of that hitting us also. And was this discussed when you were in the US for the fund bank meetings in late April?
In the context
in
of
the context
India,
of in the context of India as well.
India.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't discussed. Although, of course, the discussions pertain to the neighborhood, India's neighborhood. Some bilateral discussions pertained to that subject. But this is not a boast. I do want it to be put on record because you spoke about what were discussed in Washington. There was a great sense of admiration that we kept doing the reforms even during the pandemic. There was a very big sense of appreciation that India didn't allow its poor to suffer, particularly the way in which the food grains program has been handled. There was also a clear appreciation, and I take this opportunity to put this on record, clear appreciation that the Prime Minister literally led from the front and didn't give a feeling that the country is probably, unsure of how to handle it. He was clear and he was leading from the front. So these were clearly the kind of things which came up. And one more, but repeatedly, a fact that I heard was India leading the way in terms of digital economy, the payment system, the way in which we could use during the pandemic, and that being done at a very cost-effective manner. These are issues which have come up. And the way in which we've adopted technology to make it simpler for income tax or GST have also become a topic of conversation. So these were there. No, on the contrary, no one did worry for India, saying, oh, Indian economy, probably, I didn't hear even a whisper.
Right. So, I mean, you spent 10 days at the fund bank meeting in some sense, then you went to Germany after that with the Prime Minister. So you'll be kind of hard selling the Indian economic story abroad. So what are your takeaways from those trips?
As I said, the recovery from COVID, even after IMF bringing down the global GDP growth, India remaining at the top as the fastest growing from among comparable economies, and also the fact that India is clearly, because of the various schemes, you may say so, but because of various reasons, India becoming now the hub for sourcing many things which were otherwise in one basket. There is a clear recognition, both in Germany and also in the various meetings that I had in the United States of America, that India's economy now has become the next best, where investments are happening so that alternative sources for valuable input materials which are so required for the world is getting located. So that appreciation, and of course some of them linked it directly to the PLI which we've come up with. But the fact that India is a clear rule of law, democracy, and is English speaking, also accessible for all the developing economies and the developed economies, is now showing result. And also that we place now enough and more importance also on manufacturing. So the initial, not this visit, the last visit, questions on Atmanirbhar Bharat, whether it was inward looking, was not even there this time. So there is a clear understanding that Atmanirbhar didn't shut our doors. We are actually trying to strengthen ourselves. Of course, entertaining imports as well.
But, so I'll come to PLI and the India emerging as a manufacturing hub in just a moment. But I just wanted to, on a macro question, because of what is, again, geopolitical developments, your subsidies, your fertilizer subsidies are going up, are shooting up. Your food subsidies are also shooting up. The PM Anna Yojana was extended recently till end September. So is there a chance of your fiscal maths going out of balance?
As regards the food program, we did understand that till such a time we are confident that the recovery and also show confidence that the poor are able to stand up for themselves and they can, be sure of earning their livelihood comfortably. We wanted the food program to be extended, for which, of course, the outer understanding of a limit is about 2 lakh 10 to 2.10 or 2.20 lakh crores. And in a way, mentally, I think that calculation has been in our minds, and even during the budget preparation, that was well in our consideration zone. The fertilizer thing, last year itself, not so much with expectation, but even unexpectedly took a very big chunk out of our budgetary provisions, and we had to bring in extra during the supplementary demands. This year, even as we went in, because of the way in which the crude was playing up, and because of the ways of the supply chain disruptions, as I said, commodities, we also had these 3 elements of inputs which go in for fertilizer production. So we were conscious that even this year we may have to give a bigger number for fertilizer subsidy, because the intention is not to move it on or burden the farmers with it. So to an extent we were prepared for an additional allocation both for the Anna Yojana and also for the fertilizers.
Right. So obviously, I suppose the biggest macro challenge right now is inflation. So the inevitable question which you're often asked, which is that, do you think there is a kind of fuel tax cut dampen inflation, and also kind of related, there is a GM looking at rejigging of GST rates. Is that on the anvil as an anti-inflationary measure?
No, first thing, I know theoretically and also observers of the economy would prefer me to tomorrow go to the GST Council and say, one rate and this is it, everything is in, petrol is in, everyone is happy. No, that's not happening. Let me be very clear. The committee headed by the Chief Minister is definitely going to have to submit its report. The terms of reference given to them and also the issues which have been periodically coming in the GST Council was to see how at least we go back to the revenue neutral levels at which GST was brought in. At least go back to that. And of course, rate rationalization has been a discussion point in over 3 or 4 GST Council. That also comes in. Wherever inversion prevails, we wanted to correct that because we can't afford to go on giving these refunds. And also it had an impact on the PLI scheme as well. Wherever inversion exists, there is this big thing about refunds to be collected. Investors were not keen to come in into that. Cotton yarn is one of those classic examples. So there are calibrations with which the committee is looking at this matter. So it is not just a black and white question of the report comes from the committee and tomorrow I call a GST Council and that is only looking at hiking rates. No, sorry, I want the media to please absorb everything that I'm saying. It's not happening in the next meeting. The next meeting, obviously, let the report come. After that, I will have to circulate the report to all the ministers, and post which we'll talk about it. So the ideal situation would be, if I want to have these rationalization recommendations coming from the committee, post which the council takes it up to look at it. But I would think that committee's report itself, not before me, it's too much presumptuous for me to think it's going to happen in the next meeting.
What about a fuel tax cut?
What
But
about
it's for the states. Well, I know. I mean, some of the states have done it, some of the states haven't done it. I presume you would like more states to do it, right?
The Honorable Prime Minister has commented on it.
Okay. So I just wanted to come to privatization. Obviously, this government has walked the talk. I mean, Air India was the big one. Pavan Hans has just been done. The LIC IPO is on. So where are we with regard to some of the other, companies that have been flagged? I mean, there are two public sector banks, one insurance company, BPCL, SCI. There is perhaps a perception that some of these have slowed down due to various reasons. Could be political, could be simply the logistics and so on. So is there a, I mean, do you plan to speed those up also?
I've been hearing this from 2019. Air India happened, the same question. Neelachal Ispat happened, the same question. Pavan Hans has happened. No takers for Pavan Hans for what? 4, 5 times. But that's also gone through. The question remains the same. Where are you on privatization? You keep asking, we'll keep doing.
To be more specific, what about the two public sector banks, which were the next two?
You keep asking.
Okay. So let me just come back to one more sort of macro-related question. I mean, we had our Forex reserves. I mean, I'm just again raising it because of what is the current macro is quite high. It's close to 600 billion. But do you see a need to strengthen them further and to raise as a macroeconomic target the quantum of Forex reserves in the economy? I mean, is there an ideal level that you have in mind?
No, but with the revenue coming from all the sources at which it is coming, and also with exports showing a very clear upward trajectory, and every month from this year is also very clearly indicative that at least the exports are going to be doing very well. Particularly the service sector is also showing clear signs of good buoyancy. So I think revenue generation, and also as a result your reserves going up, are all indications on which we don't keep a number and say we'll have to. Exports, of course, we'll keep a number saying at least reach that target. But RBI themselves have spoken about what kind of a reserves they can have. They can even probably plan for higher. So that confidence comes from the central bank. It's great. For us, the confidence level will have to be on how we are going to boost exports, how we can, get going with that, how agriculture can have the benefit of export, which is now clearly coming up. Farmers are also now choosing to sell it to the trader who will export it and give them better revenue rather than look at MSP. So all across the board, you're able to see people wanting to break that old-fashioned approach of, no, I've sold it to the nearby government agency. No, things are changing. There's a lot of reset happening. So for the government, I think we'll have to cash on the moment and make sure that we're able to build on a higher target for those. That naturally will result on better reserves indirectly, and for the central bank to feel confident that it can be even higher is showing that both the engines are going fine.
Right. May I also take this opportunity to welcome our Honorable Defence Minister, Rajnath Ji. We will be hearing from him soon. I think his sector is a major, I think, a focus of the Atmanirbhar campaign, I think the defense sector, particularly in Russia. I'll also just come back to that in just a moment, but just to keep the thing going on exports. Exports are indeed have obviously recovered very smartly in the last fiscal after perhaps some stagnancy, and they're at an all-time high. But so are imports. Your monthly trade deficit is running at about 20 billion, at a 20 billion level. So are we going to see more import curbs, more Atmanirbharta to reduce the quantum of the trade deficit?
I would want to take this opportunity to say the principles governing the taxation or duties being levied, even with Atmanirbharta intact, is to make sure that the taxation is being levied on those items which are being produced in the country. We do not want to allow the doors to be open for those which are coming in at a predatory price, throwaway price for those goods which are being produced here, particularly those goods which are being produced by the MSMEs. Why would we want to ruin them by saying, no, I have to prove my sincerity about opening the economy and therefore I won't levy any duties? We've been item by item looking at those which have a production in the country, and it's only for them have we levied the duties. It's not blind application of duties. Let me reiterate, at every level, at my level, I have gone through every item which is being considered for reduction in duty or increase in duty or total removal of duty, item by item. So let me assure you that the levies of duties are very much to reinforce Atmanirbharta. Where we are producing, we will levy a duty. We don't want it coming in this country at lesser than the price at which we are producing, and if the quality is comparable. But it doesn't, the duty doesn't get levied where very clearly we don't produce, but we need it as a raw material, so I get it cheap, I get it at affordable price. I will not be imprudent in levying a duty and say make it more costly when I need it so much and I don't have it in this country. So clearly, logic and principle of strengthening the Indian economy is what has governed us levying duties. Let's be clear on that.
Right. So let me ask you, where do we stand on cryptocurrencies right now? I mean, that must also be discussed. It's a favorite question which you keep getting asked, like privatization at most. But nonetheless, it's an interesting subject. Where do we stand now on cryptocurrencies? And was this also discussed at the fund bank meetings and this thing?
Absolutely. A lot of countries showed a lot of interest. There was IMF taking very clear interest in the subject. There's a lot of interest in multilateral institutions. OECD is also very keenly following the developments. G20 wants to know, particularly because from this December, it will be our country taking the chair in G20. They want to know what we will be doing on the crypto. We've had specific discussions on it. The FSB, which is under the G20, which is located in Switzerland, has also done a lot of work on crypto. That India has chosen to go through the route of the central bank-driven digital currency is also well taken. In fact, openly at least 2 times, IMF and the World Bank authorities said India has taken this position to tax the crypto assets which are outside of the currency, which is the central bank, and they've appreciated, because the concern in the IMF and the concern in the multilateral institution is that crypto should not, because there's not enough regulatory, because of the technology involved, because there is not enough regulatory mechanisms, should not end up violating those FATF norms, FATF being financial action for terror funding. There are very many keen observations being done about where money goes. Anti-money laundering is a very important thing on which they have attention. Similarly, money going for terror funding is also something which they're very worried about. They think digital currency, digital assets or digital transactions happening may lead to such funding, and they want the regulations to be taken up at across the board kind of all countries together. So on the basis of tracking the money trail, India's step that we have gone forward taxing these transactions, crypto transactions, has been well received. They think it's out of the box. We've already started taking this step towards tracking the money. So actually on the crypto, the views that I'm hearing are very appreciative of what we have taken a step,
right,
that the currency will be through the central bank, the others will be assets, and those assets, when they create transactional profits, will be taxable, has been well received everywhere.
So are we launching a digital currency this fiscal?
Sorry?
Are we launching a digital currency?
Well, I thought I said it in the budget speech.
Right.
I have said it in the budget speech.
Finance Minister, I just want to come to the issue of the sanctions which have been imposed on Russia. I mean, there are many aspects to the sanctions, but they are extremely wide-ranging. And one, which is, I think, to the best of my knowledge, has never been used, is, for example, that the Russian central bank's reserves, which are about, in fact, roughly the same as ours, coincidentally, about 600 billion, have essentially been impounded by the Western countries, in the sense that a large part of it has become unusable. Is there some thinking in India, in Indian government, at the level of the finance minister, central bank, not that, I mean, this is a kind of, I don't think we are going to invade any other country, but nonetheless, you know, it's an unprecedented step. It's some ways a weaponization of sanctions by the Western powers. And is there some thinking as to how to deal with it?
Well, we've been talking with countries in our bilaterals that there should be an immediate cessation of the war, and that it is only through dialogue and diplomacy that we can take the issue forward. And in matters related to our oil consumption and also buying it from the source, which gives us at a concessional rate, we've clearly exerted our right in doing that, because I'm also adding one more layer to this question, which I'm sure many of you leaders in the global businesses will understand. The possibility of the Indian basket, not just the Brent crude, Indian basket going up in its price itself is even more worrying, because if because of sanction, those in Europe who were depending on Russia will now come over to taking it from the Middle East because they can't take it from Russia. The quantum available for countries like India, which had nearly 80-85% of all that we import from the Middle East, will now become even more tightened because there are more buyers into the market. And even worse, the prices will go up. I'm competing against people who have suddenly come into the market who can ask for better, supply, give more money to buy it. So the sanction has actually resulted in people rushing to alternative sources, and where countries like India are there for decades now, suddenly is going to be crowded in with more people who want to buy the same thing. So supply and price factors will now have its own ramification on us. So the long and short of what sanction does to us is this one example, which I see in the near future also constraining us.
Right. But, no, sure. But I just wanted to, it's also obvious that the range of Western sanctions in Russia only, as the war goes on, is only going to get tighter. Now they are, they've obviously, the European Union might soon stop oil imports. They say they're going to phase out gas imports also by the end of this year. We also do a reasonable amount of trade in Russia. Over time, and I know the situation is dynamic and fluid, but will we essentially, what I'm what I'm asking is that will we fall in line with the Western sanctions, just as we did more or less when Western sanctions were imposed on Iran? Or, I mean, what is the thinking? What is the government's thinking? Are we going to sort of follow the sanctions in some,
No, I
some
think
way?
we have been spending a lot of time explaining India's position, not just on the abstentions when votings took place, but also on the fact that if Russia is offering it to us at a discounted rate,
Right.
we will still be buying it because it makes perfect sense, particularly when the world is stressed out with inflation. The more the cost that you're paying for these imported commodities, the more that is going to influence your inflation levels. So we've been explaining that we will certainly purchase it. And it is not as if it is something which is being said for the first time. It is, well, very many countries in the West are still procuring it from Russia. Still procuring probably more than what they normally procured. So the idea of telling countries which are procuring 5% of what they totally consume to say you cut your 5% down, whereas I will increase my 85% to even 100, doesn't sell, doesn't go down well also. And even otherwise, I think we'll go ahead with what is good for the country. We need cheaper fuel. If it is available, why wouldn't we want to buy it? We will buy it.
Okay, so thank you. So one more question which is not related to sanctions, with Rajnath ji is also here. One sort of key structural reform which did get shelved just before the elections are the farm laws. Are you thinking of bringing them back?
Actually, many things related to the farm laws are actually happening now. You can see it happening. Farmers are selling it for export. Farmers do not want to come for MSP because they find a better price somewhere else. Many states have already started seeing the benefits of liberating the farmer. And there is just no one stopping them from doing it. So, well, it's already there. In spirit, it's actually happening already, the 3 farm laws.
I was just wondering whether, whether someone from the audience would like to ask a question to the Finance Minister. Yeah, okay, there's a hand up, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
I'd just like to know your view on the NRI status of the NRIs who got stuck during COVID and couldn't travel. Is there any decision on that? Thank you.
NRI status of people who got stuck during
NRI students or NRIs who got stuck in India?
Yeah.
Well, no, nothing in particular for me to say now.
About the tax, I was told that there was a decision.
I wish you had mentioned that.
Since they have you here.
I thought without that being said, I wanted to say, well, if your country is the country where you're residing is ready to receive you, welcome. You want to go, you go.
Yes.
But no, you wanted the tax.
Yeah, sorry, yes.
Nothing before me.
Okay. We haven't taken a decision yet.
There's nothing before me.
Oh, I was told that it was put up by the Central Board of Direct Taxes.
Wow.
Not true?
Have they?
Okay, we will check. Thank you.
There's nothing before me. And if they're putting it up, let's see, definitely.
Okay. Okay, I think we are more or less out of, we have time. Thank you for taking all these questions, Finance Minister. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think we